Welcome back to another part of my chat too with Ralph Senensky and John Dayton as we continue to talk about stories from Hollywood. Please welcome back Ralph and John. I have a question. I just want to, because we didn't talk much about this last time. I'm just curious about your process. John, you have said how Ralph was one of the most prepared directors
Absolutely
you've ever worked with. And so I'm wondering, Ralph, if you could share with our viewers, because a lot of them get very interested in, as I have been giving them an overview, trying to give them an overview of education about the filming and things like that. Your preparation and how you made decisions about how to shoot a particular scene, those decisions about knowing how much of a wide shot, a master you're going to use, why, how much coverage, when you might choose to do more than just close-ups, or just those sort of, your sort of shot list and what dictated all of that, or a moving shot. So if you could maybe just touch on that.
The basis for my directing was stage. And there was a wonderful, wonderful course at Yale Drama School, the drama department, Alexander Dean. And I've talked about him. He had a book, Principles of Play Direction. And my first excursion into drama was in high school. Myrtle Ullman taught psychology in the junior college, but she directed all of the plays. And she was a graduate of Yale Drama School. And I just saw the way she directed, and that was like a template. When I went to the Playhouse, and Gilmer Brown, through the years, the founder of the Playhouse, taught the directing class. My class, when my second year, for the first time, he didn't. Richard O'Connell, a playwright, but he also was a director and a graduate of Yale Drama School, and he taught the Alexander Dean course in directing to us, and it was just a landmark. The 5 principles were composition, picturization, movement, rhythm, and pantomimic demonstration. You started with those 5 things, and we did exercise after exercise. For the whole year, I think we met probably 3 times a week in a class, and we would just work on those. And I understood all of them, and all I could say was, yeah, but what does that have to do with play direction? And then there was the patio theater, which we had the main stage, the student stages, east balcony, west balcony, which were 45-seat theaters, and there was a patio theater, again 45-seat, which was for advanced students. And there was a director, an advanced director, who directed a play written by a fellow classman, and I went to see it. And the director was Yosef Shaheen, who went back to Egypt, where he was from, and became one of the leading Egyptian director of all time, world famous. And I watched his direction of the play, and I said, oh, I see. And I went back to see the play every night. So going back to that, I break the play down into scenes. Doing a stage play, I broke it down into French scenes, which was anytime the number of actors on the stage changed, that became a new scene. So you're breaking it down to the smallest size that you can. You didn't have to worry about that too much in film, because films kind of did that for you. But doing that, I broke it down into scenes, and then each scene, break it down into these small pieces. Each scene, what is the scene about? Who is the protagonist? Who is the victim? What is the scene about? And to just get that in mind. And then once you have that in mind, so you're not thinking about directing a whole play, you're trying to make this scene work. And would do that. Then, and I guess this was because before I got to film, I directed over 40 stage plays. And I just learned to direct actors in stage thing. And then when I got to film, I directed the scene first. And once I had the scene staged in my mind, then I figured out how to shoot it. So I started with the actor. Start with the actor, because you are a storyteller. Your actors are the people that are telling the story. Build it on them. Build the scene, and then figure out how to shoot the scene to make it work. Again, using the principles, those 5 principles in play direction.
So basically, Ralph, you are, let's say you're observing a scene. You are the camera, correct? I mean, you're seeing what the camera's seeing. Is that correct?
Yes. And I'll tell you that starting with 12 O'Clock High, William Spencer, wonderful cameraman. And Billy was about my size. I would stand there and would describe the shot. Billy would look over my left shoulder, right there, so that he was seeing what I was seeing. And then as we went on, at the beginning, I would say, what lens are you going to use? Because this was before zoom lenses. He would tell me, and after a half a dozen shows, we'd do it, and I would say 40 millimeter, and he would grin. You just kind of learned it that way by feel.
How did you learn lenses?
By listening to Billy Spencer.
Oh, really? But I mean, I remember you knew what lens you wanted to use right away. And I think there was, maybe I'm wrong, I think there was a time when you needed to use a fisheye lens.
Yes, on Star Trek. Jerry Finnerman introduced it to me on the second one I did, and then I used it in a different way on the 6th one I did.
Now, what is that? What was that lens?
9 millimeter.
You're amazing, Ralph. I mean, what effect did that present when you use that?
On Metamorphosis, we were shooting on a small sound stage, but we were on an empty planet and we wanted space. And by using it, the camera would be maybe 7 paces from the camera, but with the 9 millimeter, it looked like the camera was a football field away.
So you could shoot in a confined area and make it look like it was.
And then I used that same lens later in a scene where there was madness, and for the person who was mad, for his point of view, I used the 9 millimeter effectively.
So, as a director coming from a play director going to film, how did you make that? Well,
I had a training ground for camera because I worked for 4 years on the staff of Playhouse 90. So I was in the booth watching Frank Schaffner, George Hill, Ralph Nelson, Frankenheimer, Arthur Penn, Vince Donahue, the whole string of them. You start to absorb. And then when I went to Metro on Dr. Kildare, again, I was on staff for 6 months before I got to direct one. And you just learn by observing.
Wow. That was your first one, right? Dr. Kildare, that was your first?
Yes.
When you said you were on staff, what was your position on staff?
On Playhouse 90, my first year, I was a secretary. Then the next 3 years, I was the production supervisor. And then when that went off the air, I spent 6 months on a daytime soap where I was the assistant to the producer. And when I went to Metro, that's what I was. I was the assistant to the producer.
And this is all in Los Angeles?
Oh, yes.
I remember how close your home was on Sunset Plaza.
Yes.
It was just a short drive down to CBS, which was on Fairfax.
Well, as a matter of fact, it was a short drive to almost every studio, which is why I lived there.
Mm-hmm. Just I wanted to get back to it. I'm sure you just didn't, as your first show as a director for television, and that was a big show. That was a hit show.
Yes.
Weren't you nervous?
No. John, my first day of filming on that, I had 19 setups by lunch, and at the end of the day, I had 39 setups.
All right, so explain for people that don't know what a setup is. Could you please tell us?
Well, it's a shot. It's a part of a scene. It's the part of a scene. Sometimes it'll be a close-up. Sometimes it'll be a master or two shot. Whatever your shot is, I had that many.
One camera, right?
Yes.
One film camera.
Well, you learned that in television. In television, when you didn't have time, you learned how to do things quickly and to be prepared to do it.
So if time was short, something had delayed, something had taken longer, would you compensate by revamping so you had to do fewer setups?
Yes, could do that. And there was a great example of that when I was on location doing The Conflict. Our last day of filming, we went over to the site where the Richard Hatch character was going to build his home, and I had a scene with Richard Hatch and the gal playing his wife, and then a big scene with Richard and John, John Boy.
Richard and Richard.
The two
added by the character Boone. It was a long sequence that really needed 3 to 4 hours. We shot it in about an hour and a half because it was the end of our last day. And I had the staging ready and I just kept cutting close-ups. And after I did that, I said, oh, it was better without the close-ups.
Ralph, can just go back to when you were observing in the booth or the control room, I guess you would call it now. These directors were using multiple cameras.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, 4 cameras. So for you as a director, you went from your experience in the control room with multiple cameras to Dr. Kildare, which was one single camera.
Which is easy.
And maybe you could explain, actually it's funny because I was talking to a young guy yesterday about, he didn't know the difference. This is a college student. He didn't know the difference between shooting with one film camera and multiple video cameras. So
I also shot with multiple film cameras, not only video cameras.
Wow.
Like on the Firestorm, I had 2 cameras when we were doing the book burning scene. I was always kind of frustrated that I'd gone through the whole Playhouse 90 and then 6 months out of soap. So I knew I knew what the process was for directing with television cameras. Father Kaiser had a show called Insight.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I did 15 of them, 15 or 16 of them. They were shooting on tape.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And I learned how to do it, but I know that I never really succeeded because what you're doing is you're looking at the monitors and you literally are filming it and editing it at the same time.
Mm-hmm. So I keep getting back to, I can't believe that you had all this experience of observing, like I had observing it. You were in a control room looking at monitors, and Ralph Nelson or whoever is calling the shots. And your first show is a single camera show, film. I can't believe you weren't nervous. I mean, it's a huge difference.
Well, I also had support there. I mean, I knew how to do it, but on Dr. Kildare, we had 3 editors, and Jody Copeland was going to be the editor of my first show. So I was mostly concerned with just the first scene. So I staged the first scene and laid out my shots, and then I went to Jody and I showed him it, and he said, "It's fine." He saw that everything worked. I wasn't trapping myself into bed. And so the next day I went to him again. I said, "Well, I redid it last night." And I really hadn't changed the staging. I just changed the way I filmed it with my selection of shots of where I did my first master and then the breaking up after that. And he looked at it and he said, "Fine." And so the next day I went to him with my third one.
Wow.
And he said, by now he's chuckling, and he said, "Fine." We got to the weekend, it was Saturday, and I called him at home and I said, "Jody, can I come over?" And he says, "Yeah." So I went over and I showed it to him, what I had done. And he said, "Fine." We filmed on Monday. Tuesday, we went to Daly's. And afterward, Jody, with the big grin on his face, said, "What happened?" I said, "Well, I did it again." And that was the one I filmed.
So when you said that you did it again,
You
followed your shot list, right?
But I never called it a shot list.
Okay.
And I didn't have a list. I had my script, and then I had it marked off in the script. My scripts looked like, they were colorful with lines and circles and all different colors: orange, red, blue, green, each recognizing something else. I mean, red was for action, blue was for shots, orange was for location. But I had laid out like that, and then I could just go through and look at my website, because I have pages on some of the episodes. Not on all of them, but there are pages from the script there. And the other thing that I learned when I did my first show, Archie Smith, wonderful cameraman. And again, I'd been on staff for 6 months. They were going to take care of me. All the cameraman, the art director, the editors. And Archie, when I came in to do my first setup, he insisted I staged the scene for him to see the whole scene before I start to shoot it, so that he could check as I was going through that I wasn't going to trap myself into a place where I'm getting a mismatch. And once starting doing it that way, which worked fine, because that was going back to my theater training, my stage training. That's the way I did it for 26 years. I always staged the scene, and then it was loosely staged. You never wanted to stage the scene to get a performance. You wanted the performance to happen when the cameras were rolling.
Thanks for joining me for part 2 of Chat 2 with Ralph and John. I'll be back with more stories from the Waltons and Ask Judy segments and more special guests. Thanks for watching.